how are you all doing? I'm so excited for this one. I know you are all waiting for the preview panel. And who better to host this than the legendary, the mythical. Please, I want to see a round of applause for Gavin Verhey.
Hey.
Taken on stage.
Hello. Hello, 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 and welcome to MagicCon Barcelona. Are you all excited? Who out there likes Ixalan? Who out there is a fan of Doctor Who? And who out there wants to see some cards from Wilds of Eldraine? All right, very exciting. Well, I'm excited to bring on some very special guests to talk about them with you. First of all, we've got Senior Art Director Ovidio. Come on up, Ovidio, come on up. Look at this guy. Part of the key of making Magic's art happen, absolutely fantastic. And then can I please all get you to put a very warm welcome to the man, the myth, the legend, you drive to work with him, Mr. Mark Rosewater. Here he is, here he is. Amazing, thank you all so much. We have a ton to talk about today, so I'm gonna skip any preamble and just get right into showing you awesome stuff, if that all sounds good, I think, right? All right, well, let's kick it off with a little set called The Caverns of Ixalan, Lost Caverns of Ixalan. Right here, Mark Rosewater, what made us go back to Ixalan? What happened this time around?
So interestingly, when we started, we'd been wanting to do an underground world for a long time. And in fact, when we started, it wasn't Ixalan. It was just new underground world. And as we started building it, we realized that, you know what, it made sense to be on Ixalan. And so we eventually we made it Ixalan. So the one thing I want to stress is this isn't like Return to Ixalan in the sense that it's not mechanically Ixalan. This is really a brand new mechanical approach, but set on Ixalan. What I've been calling a backdrop set. Like Ixalan's the backdrop, but it's brand new. Now we'll have dinosaurs and vampires and pirates, and they'll be there, but it's not going to be a typo set about those things. It's more about this brand new world we're discovering.
Right, and Merfolk too, of course.
And Merfolk,
they're there, don't worry.
Leave Merfolk out.
Okay, fantastic. Well, a video, let's walk through a little bit what's going on here. So story-wise and world-wise, what is happening in the Lost Caverns of Ixalan?
So I just want to say I've been preparing for Ixalan my whole life, right? It's something I've wanted to make forever. And as Mark said, there's a lot of new stuff. So we enriched this plane. It's fully populated with new groups. And we're going to see the groups that we know and love already scrambled to the underground in search of a new resource. It's a resource of wealth, it's a resource of power, and they're going to head up against each other in here.
Yeah, let's take a first look at some of the art here from the Lost Caverns of Ixalan. Let's put that up on the screen. So here's an art piece. What is going on here?
So the Unstable Glyph Bridge, as part of the underground, one of the ideas was this is an action adventure set. You want to sell that like the risks of adventure archaeology, I'll say, right? So in this one, you see the Legion of Dusk. They are failing at one of the tests that one of the civilizations down here put in here, chasing the resource, which is Cosmium. It's right there glowing in the middle, and it'll appear throughout the set.
Okay, so to kind of start off, they're trying to get into the caves a little bit.
Yeah.
And where are they all heading to?
They are headed to the core of Ixalan. Ixalan is a hollow world, and in between the surface and the core, there's a bunch of new groups that we'll see. There's a bunch of challenges and tests that some of these people are not going to make it. And at the core of Ixalan, you see this inverted sphere where there's a new civilization and there's a sun at the center, and the sun is the source of that power that everyone's looking for. And we'll see more of that as we go through the previews.
Well, let's see some more artwork. Let's go on to the next next slide here. So here's something pretty cool. Talk to me about what we're seeing here.
Well, angels in Ixalan. Like, for the first time, we're going to see angels in Ixalan. This was the first illustration that I commissioned. It looks as if it's outside, but it's not outside, right? It's in the core. At every moment, you're not going to see the sky. You're going to see the earth on the other side because you're at the center of a hollow sphere. The angels were designed by Victor Adame. This illustration by Victor Adame is amazing. He's over there. We're going to ask him some questions about it. He's over there in the artist alley. The design is based on the resplendent quetzal, which is a very important bird in Mesoamerica, and it's actually the national bird of my country. And I based the Birds of Paradise that I did on the quetzal too. So putting a little bit of our culture, our flavor into the set.
So you really have been training for the set your whole life, as you said.
I
right?
have been training for it my whole life. Yeah, I didn't know it.
What's the percentage of the set that is outside versus inside? Like you mentioned, we're mostly underground, and this picture is actually underground. So as we're going through this presentation, are most of the images going to be underground?
Yes. We will see, I think, most of the set is underground. And sometimes it's going to look like it's in the core, like this, right? Like if you're never going to see a blue sky with clouds, if that's the question.
So as we're going through the presentation, keep in mind what you're seeing is underground. So stuff looks a little bit different in the background. That's what's going on. Now let's take a look at a returning character, someone who is quite loved. Here's Huatli.
Huatli, yeah.
She's back. Tell me about Huatli. And is she still a planeswalker?
So let's walk around that question for a second. Huatli, she's coming to the core to open negotiations with the civilization at the core of Ixalan, their ancestors, the ancestors of the Sun Empire. And like every good negotiation, you need to bring an army of dinosaurs.
Of course.
Right?
I bring those to all my negotiations.
If you don't bring dinosaurs to a negotiation, you're probably set up to fail. I will say I was a little surprised. She is not a planeswalker, but her card is amazing. So I just can't wait for people to see what the card does. It's really cool. The art is by Tyler Jacobson. He also is here, and you should visit him. He designed Huatli originally. We changed the design a little bit so that Huatli looks like an explorer, like an adventurer, not just like a knight, but someone who set out on an expedition of peace and dinosaur friendship.
Yes, of course.
Right?
Lots of dinosaur friendship. Just like this next card, for example, who is exactly what I would bring in if I was doing some negotiations.
This you need to set this up, right? This piece is by Nestor Osandon. We see some of the structures that the civilization that lives here at the center of Ixalan has made. They have harnessed Cosmium. That's why the Sun Empire they're hedging their bets. Everyone, the pirates, the Legion of Dusk, everyone's coming in here for that resource. Everyone's coming here with their own agenda, and we'll see some battles, we'll see some conflicts. Who against who, we'll find out, but it goes with a bang.
All right, let's take a look at another piece of art here that actually Mark Rosewater showed off last week as a sneaky little preview. What in the world and who in the world is this video?
So this is a character that we affectionately refer to as Dino Hands. It was the first god designed for the set.
So there are gods here.
There are gods in Ixalan. So it's gods like you've never seen before. Super authentic, based on Mesoamerican mythology. That is why Ojer Ashonil, that's how you pronounce it, Ojer Ashonil has all these elements that are symbolic, because gods are shapeshifters, right? Not in the creature type sense, just in the mythological sense. They can take any form. And so you have a lot of symbols around them that represent what they do in this world. And that's why I wanted a different approach, not just a giant human, but a big collection of symbols. And this design is just so powerful, so beautiful. I was really happy when I saw this piece. It was also one of the first concept art pieces I saw. Great, great, beautiful work.
So can you tell us how many gods are there in Ixalan?
Let's say there's a few. There's one surprise. We might get to see one more today.
Okay.
That's all I can say.
Well, the presentation is built, so hopefully we'll see it or not. We'll find out. All right, let's go on to the next slide. Here we go. Whoa, they're riding a bat?
Yes, I'm very excited to show this one. This is a member of the civilization at the core of Ixalan. They're called the Oltecs.
Wow.
They ride bats to war. They control Cosmium. They're the only ones who can harness it. All those glowing purple lines, it's this resource at the center that comes from the sun. So they have their own sun that they like. And this character is named Anim Pakal. She's the general of the Oltec, and she's headed to a negotiation. I suppose she brought all her bat warriors and all her power to just conduct some foreign relations. The Oltec love building temples and pyramids in high altitudes, and it brings a lot of authenticity to the set. And the costuming is based on the textiles I grew up looking at. The artwork that I grew up admiring. The Oltec, they don't need armor. They are that powerful. They just use the power of Cosmium to defend themselves.
So you spoke about kind of your heritage a bit here. Talk to me about kind of the research that went into making a set like this.
So in order to conduct research for this set, I decided to be born in Mesoamerica and spend a few years there, like my 31st years of my life, learning about this world. We brought a lot of our lived experiences to the set. So it's really short of visiting the ancient great cities. This is a great experience for people to see. I'm really excited for everyone to see the set and how it's received and everything.
We also brought in some cultural consultants as well to work on this with us.
We did bring 2 cultural consultants, language consultants as well. That's why I'm saying Ojera Shonil. So we had quite a bit of in-depth knowledge in the set. There were several Latinos in the concept push, and in the writing side, Miguel Lopez and myself, as co-leads, we wanted to honor our heritage in a really adventure way. You know, it's a dream to make a fantasy set like this for us because it's unique. And I will say we'll see Ixalan in a way we haven't seen it.
That's so cool. Well, speaking of a way we haven't seen Ixalan before, let's go on to this next art piece here. Could this be that other god you were hinting at?
Yes. Ojer Kaslem is one of the most beautiful pieces in the set for me, painted by the great Ryan Pancoast. It's based, the character, it's got a lot of the symbols of the wisdom of nature. And it's based on the monarch migration in Michoacan, right? The monarch butterflies start in Michoacan, fly all the way to California. It's such a beautiful, I was lucky enough to see it. It's such a beautiful event that if every person should see it, it's a wonder of nature. And it's included in this character design by Victor. And it has 2 symbols of wisdom, the snake and the abuela, right? The abuela who brings you home and cooks for you and gives you love. We wanted to put a lot of these things that are very important to us in Mesoamerica. And as an addition, there's some alpacas, there's some llamas, and maybe a capybara or 2 in there.
I love it. I love seeing the very grandmotherly abuela figure pictured so prominently on a card, right? I mean, that feels like a cool thing that would be a god in a world of Ixalan, right?
Yes. It's a wisdom. Wisdom is a very powerful thing, and we wanted to make sure we honored it.
So at least 2 gods in the set. So we know there's at least 2.
2 gods that we know of so far stay tuned.
Very exciting. Anything else you want to tell us about Ixalan before we depart onto the next thing in video?
Well, just be ready. I think people are going to be. I hope people are blown away by the environments and the work. Just pay attention to this one. You don't really see a sky, you see more land. There's a lot of world to cover. We've done a lot to expand Ixalan into a fully fledged plane with many areas you can visit and get lost in. And I loved this set. I hope sometime we can return to it because there's a lot more to see.
Amazing. Well, a video knocked it out of the park on this one. Mark, yeah, go
I
ahead.
just want to point out, they're not letting you talk about mechanics yet, but it's also fun to play.
It's very fun to play.
Also fun to play.
It's fantastic. I mean, and Ovidio and his team knocked it out of the park. We need a big hand for Ovidio on this one. Incredible.
Gracias.
I know for me, when the art started coming back, I was blown away. And just seeing the colors and the vibrancy and the creative things we came up with, you have not even seen the tip of the iceberg. So be sure to check out the Lost Caverns of Ixalan when it hits in November. Very, very, very exciting. Now we're going to go on to something that, for me, is very, very, very exciting. Let's move on to Doctor Who Commander.
Gavin was born for this set.
Yes. This is truly a dream project for me. When I was told that I was doing this, I couldn't believe it was real. And I'm so excited to get to talk with you at all today. If you've been following the past week or so, we've given away a few things. But today we're going to do a deep dive and show off a ton of brand new cards. So let's get started, shall we? All right. Doctor Who Commander. So we divvied the decks up into 4 different decks. There are 4 Commander decks coming to you, each with about 50, that's 50, new cards apiece. So that's a ton of new content coming here. 60 years of Doctor Who. We tried to boil it down as well as we could, and we couldn't fit everything in, but there's a lot of new stuff. All the cards have new art, and like I said, 50 new cards per deck. And the biggest question we asked ourselves going to the next slide is, who's your Doctor, right? Which Doctor is yours? And we divided it up by era. So we have kind of 4 decks based on different eras of Doctor Who. And this first deck is about the first 8 Doctors, so the first through 8 Doctors from the original run of the show. And it's helmed, of course, by none other than the 4th Doctor, Tom Baker himself. Let's take a look at the card. First ever reveal here of the 4th Doctor. So it's a 4-mana 4/4. I mean, come on, that's perfect. 4-mana 4/4, and it has a little future sight effect, which is perfect for the Doctor. You can look at the top card of your library any time, and each turn you can play a historic land or historic spell from the top of your library. And this deck is a green, white, blue historic deck. That is the theme of this deck. In Doctor Who, especially in classic episodes, they often go back in time, and there's all kinds of historicals. So historic was a perfect fit for all of the cool characters and gadgets and sagas, of which there are 8 brand new sagas in this deck as well. Now, of course, he asks you a question. Would you like whatever's on top of the deck? Maybe it's a Colossus of Sardia. Who knows? Would you like a Colossus of Sardia? Would you like it was always Jite? Whatever's there, he might cast you. Maybe some more Doctor Who themed things. And he also makes this food token, of course, which is, if we go to the next slide, these adorable little candies. We knew early on we had to make a 4th Doctor food token, so of course we had to get this done. And if you were following last week, you saw that there's also a fish fingers and custard food token in the 9th, 10th, and 11th Doctor deck. So if there's different tokens in different decks that are the same name, they got their own treatment for that deck in many cases, which is pretty darn cool. Now, you might be wondering, hey, this is a green, white, blue deck, but the 4th Doctor is only green, blue. Well, how is that going to work? Well, just as iconic as the Doctors are the companions themselves. So if we go to the next slide, here is Sarah Jane Smith, the 4th Doctor's trusted companion and reporter. They both start in the command zone together thanks to the Doctor's Companion mechanic. The way that Doctor's Companion works is you can have 2 commanders if the other is the Doctor. And the Doctor has to be specifically a Time Lord Doctor, okay? So it can't be more types. Sorry, it cannot pair with Morpheon, as hilarious as that would be. No Morpheon in the command zone with Sarah Jane Smith. Just any of our Doctors in this set, plus any of our companions, to let you tell your own story, to build your own fun Doctor Who tale. And of course, you can play it out of the box, Sarah Jane Smith and the 4th Doctor, or you can mix and match whoever you choose. If you want to play Rose Tyler and the 4th Doctor, that is totally your prerogative to do so. You can build a very strange deck, and kind of a big mantra we used in design for Doctor Who was build your own episode, where every single game feels like its own wild episode of Doctor Who. Let's go on to the next card here. Let's talk about Time Lord Regeneration. So this is a moment that's depicted from the Fifth Doctor's regeneration. It's a very iconic moment. And really early on in design, we wanted to try a bunch of regeneration mechanics for the Doctor, right? One key thing about Time Lords and the Doctor is they regenerate into new Doctors. Well, we tried a bunch of mechanics and none of them really worked out, but we wanted to make sure to find a way to capture that on a card somewhere. Because writing it on every single Doctor would be a lot of text, and the existing regenerate mechanic didn't really make sense for what the Doctor actually does when they regenerate. So we wanted to have a brand new card to capture it, and here's Time Lord Regeneration here, which says that when a Time Lord you control dies this turn, when one Time Lord dies this turn, you get to flip until you hit a new Time Lord and put it directly into play, which for 1 blue mana is awesome, right? You get to trade whatever Time Lord you have into a brand new one. So one Doctor into another, a pretty good deal. Let's go on to the next card here. Here's TARDIS. We showed this off last week, but I wanted to make sure you all saw it too. Of course, it's the most iconic blue box in the whole series, maybe the most iconic thing about all of Doctor Who. And anyone can crew it. Technically, anybody can crew it and attack with it. You can get in with your 2/4 flying vehicle. But if you crew it, or if you control a Time Lord, of course, you can crew it to its full potential. And your next spell gets Cascade, which is kind of like flipping down into time and space. And you get to planeswalk to another plane, which, yes, there are planes in these decks. There's 10 planes in every deck, 10 plane chase cards. Thank you. It made a lot of sense for Doctor Who. It was a really, really perfect fit. Notably, this card is plenty strong if you're not plane chasing, but if you are, even better. And you might go to a plane such as the TARDIS Bay, bringing it up right here. This one also lets you Cascade, which is fitting, given the TARDIS has you Cascade. But also, when chaos ensues, you gain control of an artifact and then run away. So just like the Doctor did all those years ago, stealing the TARDIS and running, you two get to live that out in the TARDIS Bay. So like I said, 10 new plane chase cards in every deck, and lots of new cards as well. So that is the classic deck, a bit of what you can expect here. The face card, the companion that goes along with it. I'll call out there are other companions in the deck you can mix and match with. So if you want to play the first Doctor and Susan, you can do that too. But of course, the face characters are the 4th Doctor and Sarah Jane Smith. Now that's the classic deck. Who out there likes the 9th, 10th, and 11th Doctors? I thought there might be a few fans of those out there. Well, let's go on to the next deck, which is... Oh, excuse me. There's one more card to show off here. I apologize. This is our Saga. This is City of Death. I got so excited about the deck. I almost forgot about one of my favorite cards, City of Death. This is based on the classic 4th Doctor episode, City of Death. Each Doctor gets its own saga. In this saga, in the story of this episode, there are 6 fake Mona Lisas that are created. And so what happens is you create a treasure token, and then each turn you forge a new copy of the Mona Lisa. Of course, maybe you want to tell your own story and actually forge a new copy of a 5/5 dragon token, maybe. Whatever you're creating, you could do it here. I'll call out the fact that it says non-saga. You might be wondering why it says that. It says it because we found out that making a token of City of Death and copying it was very, very powerful and got out of hand very, very quickly. So you can't do that, but you can do most other things with this card. And here's a bespoke treasure token for this deck featuring Romana, one of the Doctor's companions. And I love this card. I love the whimsy and the art of this card. It's really, really cool and really, really fantastic. And just one of the mini sagas we're going to bring to you. And I think this card is, like I said, very, very awesome. Okay, cool card. But now, let's go into the 9th, 10th, 11th Doctor deck. Here we go. Makes sense we get lost in time and space during this panel. I mean, that's just appropriate. So this is the Timey Wimey deck. This deck is all about time counters. It's a theme we've never done before in a Commander deck, but made a lot of sense for Doctor Who. Going backwards and forwards in time, using mechanics like Suspend and Vanishing and other cards that accrue time counters. If we go on to this card here, here's the 10th Doctor, David Tennant himself. This is a 3/5 creature for 5. This suspends cards from the top of your library every turn when you attack. Keeping in mind, he doesn't have to attack, just you have to attack with somebody. And this Timey Wimey ability lets you time travel, which is a brand new mechanic. What time travel does is it lets you put more time counters on all your cards in play that have time counters. So you get to keep your vanishing cards around for a little longer, build up your other cards, and it lets you tick down your suspended cards with time counters. So you're literally manipulating the flow of time, right? You're speeding up your suspend cards, you're keeping your vanishing cards around for longer, and you really are the Doctor in history messing around with time. Now, I mentioned Vanishing and Suspend, but what are some other cards that accrue time counters? Well, how about none other than the 10th Doctor's companion, Rose Tyler. Here she is. She gets +1/+1 for every time counter on her, and she accrues time counters by being the bad wolf. Whenever she attacks, she gets a time counter for every suspended card that you have, and each permanent you have that has a time counter on it. So you might attack with her, suspend a card off the 10th Doctor. Well, that's one card already in suspend, but the decks are full of other cards that accrue time counters that will let her grow very, very quickly. And it's not uncommon to see a gigantic Rose become the bad wolf and absolutely crush your opponents. Plus, she comes down on turn 2. The 10th Doctor comes out on turn 5, so she'll be in play by the time the 10th Doctor hits, and hopefully already accrued a little bit of power there. Now, in these decks, you can play these cards together. Of course, you play Doctors and Companions as your commanders, but there are also just 3-color legends you can use as your commander. And here's one of my favorites. Here is the Face of Bo. This is a very, very, very cool card and a very iconic character from the series. He lets you cast spells with Suspend for their Suspend cost rather than their mana cost, and you cast them right away. So you can play Ancestral Vision for 1 mana, Restore Balance for 1 mana, Wheel of Fate for 2 mana, Errant Ephemeron for 2 mana, all that kind of stuff. It is a very cool and unique card, and I look forward to you all going to acquire all the Suspend cards in history, plus the new ones in these decks to build a really cool new deck with. The Face of Bo is a really, really fun commander. Please give it a try. Another cool thing you'll find in these decks are some cards that break your heart. So here's one in particular called Four Knocks. This depicts this moment where the 10th Doctor sacrifices himself to save Wilfred's life and begins to regenerate. And this uses the vanishing mechanic. So you play it down, and every turn you're going to draw a new card, an extra card, as long as it's in play. So minimum, you're going to draw 3 cards. It vanishes after 4 turns. You have to get to your pre-combat main phase to draw your card. So you'll get minimum 3 cards, which for 3 mana is already pretty solid. But if you can time travel at all, it's kind of like a build your own Phyrexian Arena for 3 mana. You play it for 3, and if you time travel a little bit, keep it around, you'll just keep drawing cards as things go on. And this card is plenty good without time travel, just drawing you 3 cards, but is really good if you have any way to manipulate it or blink it or anything like that. Now, I want to talk about a saga. I'm going to show you off 1 saga per deck today. When it comes to the 11th Doctor, to me, no episode is more iconic. He's got a lot of great episodes, but no episode is more iconic than his debut episode, The 11th Hour, where he really becomes the Doctor. So here's what The 11th Hour does, and these sagas really tell the story of the episode. The first thing that happens is the Doctor shows up. It's a brand new Doctor. Here he is. Then, of course, he crash lands and he meets a young Amy and makes some fish fingers and custard, which is what this 1/1 human token and or the food token this 1/1 human token are representing. And then the big antagonist of the episode is Prisoner Zero, who copies things and becomes kind of clones people in his own sense. And that's exactly what's happening here. Now, one thing I want to mention is this deck is full of, and these decks are full of cool bespoke tokens for the things that are created, so we could really bring the world of Doctor Who to life. And we went the extra mile to really help bring Doctor Who to life with these cards. So let's take a look at these tokens. Here's your Fish Fingers and Custard token, and also your Young Amy Pawn token, to really make sure you had just the token for the occasion, and like you had to play with some extra characters, right? We didn't make an individual card for a Young Amy, but we got her in on a token still, and I think that's very cool. And of course, you make sure Doctor's easier to cast, so that Doctor you find on the first stage is a little easier to cast once your second turn comes around. Now, once again, there's Plane Chase here as well. Here's a card that will break your heart as well, Bad Wolf Bay, which flickers out a card every turn. It just keeps flickering in and out and in and out until eventually chaos ensues and they're lost forever, which is kind of what happens in the episode. Absolutely tragic. And if you missed it last week, we actually showed off a saga last week as well. Here it is again up on screen with The Parting of the Ways, another very cool saga you'll find in this deck. This is the 9th Doctor saga. So like I said, each Doctor gets 1 saga from an iconic episode. Here's the 9th Doctor saga. We've seen the 11th Doctor saga. And someday, not today, you will see the 10th Doctor saga. But that's a story for another time. So that's the 9th, 10th, and 11th Doctor cards. Pretty cool, right? Yeah? Yeah? All right. Good, good. Now let's move on to the 12th and 13th Doctors deck. This is called Paradox Power. And this deck is all about Paradox, which is a mechanic that you all have never seen before. So let me tell you what Paradox is. Let's go to the next slide. Here is the 13th Doctor's card. She's got this mechanic called Paradox, and to use Paradox, you have to be very, very, very clever, because what happens is whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, all your Paradox abilities trigger. Now, how are you going to do that? Cascade, Retrace, Flashback, all that kind of stuff, Escape, all these abilities you'll find in this deck and help you cast things not from your hand. There's also a bit of a +1/+1 counter sub-theme running through this deck. And so you can spread out counters, and in fact, it's more counters than just +1/+1 counters, other kinds of counters too. And then at the end of your turn, because she loves having a lot of people in her TARDIS, the 13th Doctor is known for having a very big crew, you get to untap all your creatures that have counters on them. And a great creature to put a counter on and untap would be this character, Yasmin Khan, the 13th Doctor's trusty companion. What Yasmin does, she can tap to exile your top card. You can play it until the end of your next end of this turn, or beginning of your next end step. So on your turn, you can tap her, flip over your top card, cast it this turn. That'll trigger the 13th Doctor, put a +1/+1 counter on someone, let's say her, and then at the end of your turn, she'll untap, and because of the wording of Yasmin Khan, you can actually activate her on your opponent's turn then again too, and that card will last until your turn. So it's a really big card advantage engine, letting you basically draw a ton of extra cards and give you a ton of extra value. Now those are the two phase characters, but there's all kinds of other mechanics in this deck too that let you do this, as I mentioned, including one that was a great fit for this character, the Foretold. So here is the Foretold Soldier. Now it's a 4-mana 6/6, which is very exciting. And the story of this episode is this kind of mummy appears, and it shows up to only one person, and in 66 seconds kills that person off. They're the only one that can see it, they're the only one that can interact with it, and then it vanishes until it comes back later on down the road. So the Foretold, appropriately enough, becomes Foretold. You can foretell it. It shows up. It must be blocked. It can only be blocked by one creature. And then when it hits you, it goes back to being Foretold. And you can cast it again for 2 mana later on down the road. Now that might seem like a bit of a drawback, but in this deck that's actually upside, because every turn you can then recast off a Foretell and replay it, which is pretty cool. And kind of every other turn it shows up to do its thing and give you constant triggers over the course of the game. Also protects itself from board sweepers and stuff too, which is very cool. Now heading on to the next card, which is the 13th Doctor's Saga. Here is the Flux. Now this is from a brand new 13th Doctor story, one of her newest ones. You might have seen it. And the way this works is it comes into play and deals 4 damage. Then for 4 turns, you flip your top card and can play it that turn. And at the end, you have the big epic conclusion, and you get 6 mana. If you watch The Flux, one Easter egg that I love, is you'll know that The Flux was a 6-part mini-series, kind of a bunch of episodes. It wasn't actually one episode, it was 6 different parts. That was kind of one big story. So we gave this card 6 chapters to reflect the 6 parts of the story, which I think is a nice little nod. Now, I mentioned planes, and it's true, every deck has 10 new plane chase cards, but they're not all necessarily planes. Here is this card. This is a phenomenon that you'll find in the plane chase deck called Fixed Point in Time. Each deck gets 1 new phenomenon. And what this card does is basically say, sometimes you can get away from a plane. You can planes walk away by rolling the planar die. When this hits, you're almost certainly going to do whatever, at some point, whatever the chaos ability is, because it's a fixed point in time, there's no escaping it, and Clara must face the Raven. So that's what you can expect out of the 12th and 13th Doctor deck. Now on to the last deck, which is not about a specific era of Doctor Who. This is about the villains. Who likes the villains of Doctor Who? Yeah, right? Just as iconic as the heroes of Doctor Who, the Doctor are the villains themselves. And so this deck spans all the eras of Doctor Who, and we're calling this deck theme kind of something we call group slug artifacts. What that means is, as villains, you try and make all of your opponents hate you by hitting them all equally. So you want to hit all of your opponents all at once, using mechanics like Myriad and other similar things. And there's a bit of an artifact sub-theme as well, because Daleks and Cybermen, as well as many other of the villains, are artifacts. So let's take a look at the face card for the deck, Davros, Dalek Creator. So it's a 3/4 menace, and what Davros wants you to do is get as many of your opponents as possible to lose 3 life each turn. Because what happens is at the beginning of your end step, if any opponent lost 3 or more life, you get a 3/3 Dalek. Then each opponent that did has to make a villainous choice. This is a brand new mechanic. The way villainous choice works, villains love doing this. They love saying, hello, hero. Here are 2 horrible things you have to choose between. Choose one of 2 bad options, and they put you in kind of this predicament. That's what Davros does here. Every opponent that took 3 or more, lost 3 or more life that turn, has to choose that either you get to draw a card or they have to discard a card. So either you're going to go way up on cards, they're going to discard cards. It gives you a ton of value. And no matter what, when you deal 3 more damage, you get that 3/3 Dalek token, which looks just like this. And of course, they're very menacing, the Daleks, so they all have menace. We wanted to make sure to give them that keyword here. Now, what are you going to do with all your Daleks? Well, perhaps you will use one of their most iconic catchphrases, which, if you know it, say it with me. Exterminate. There it is. Let's exterminate right here. This blows up a creature. You can replicate it for every doll you control or every changeling you control and kill off a bunch of creatures. Notably, this card makes them lose 3 life, which means that Exterminate will trigger your Davros, so make sure that your Davros happens. So that's a pretty nice little Easter egg there that connects on in. Now, the Davros and the Daleks are one of the Doctor's greatest villains, but not the Doctor's only great villain. Of course, that would be the Master and their various incarnations. And here is Missy, a very popular fan favorite character. So she's got a lot going on here. She partners with the Cybermen in this episode. So she's a 6-mana 4/5, and whenever a non-artifact creature dies from any player, it comes back under your control, face down and tapped, as a 2/2 Cyberman artifact creature. We came up with this ability really early on. Shout out to Trick Jared who came up with this. It's a really, really cool ability because in the show, the Cybermen are these like faceless entities, right? You become one, they convert you into a Cyberman, and then they're all kind of the same. They're all standard. And so you would get turned face down, you lose your identity, and you become a 2/2 Cyberman. That's what happens when you become a Cyberman, and a number of cards do this. Additionally, her other ability here makes at the beginning of your end step, each opponent has to face a villainous choice. They take 1 damage for every artifact creature you have, which with Missy could be quite a few, or you get to draw a card and chaos ensues. Now, once again, this card works great if you're not playing Plane Chase, but writing chaos ensues on a master or a master character like Missy was just too good of an opportunity because when they show up, chaos almost always ensues. So you also, if you're playing Plane Chase, you get this little bonus of chaos ensuing, but just drawing the card is plenty strong enough. So with Missy, either take a bunch of damage or you draw a card. Make sure your hand is always very full. And here's the Cyberman overlay, so kind of like a manifest overlay. This is what you'll use to actually cover up your Cybermen to show that they are in fact Cybermen. But unlike manifest, they can't be turned face up. They're lost forever. Now, one thing in these decks I mentioned is that it covers kind of all the span of Doctor Who. And it's not just the new stuff. We've seen some newer stuff here so far. But now I'm going to show you an old character. This is a character called the Veil Yard from the old run of the show. One thing that the Veil Yard does, the big thing they do, is they put the Doctor on trial. They're kind of like, hey, you committed crimes, Doctor. Turns out it's not all on the up and up, and they had their thumb on the scale a little bit. So with the Veil Yard, it doubles all your opponent's villainous choices. So if they would have to make a villainous choice, they have to do it twice instead, which is absolutely brutal. And then also you get to get an extra vote every round. So you can build a really fun blue, black, red kind of voting villainous choice politics deck with this, where you've got your thumb on the scale the whole time, helping control the politics of your opponent. Now, the villains were not going to get left out of the Saga game as well, because all the Doctors, they all get a Saga, but the villains should also get some Sagas. So there are 4 Sagas in the villains deck, and here is one of them from an iconic episode featuring the Cybermen and Missy. This was one of our first art pieces that came back, and I fell in love with it right away, and it's a very strong card. For the first 2 chapters, you make someone mill 2 cards, and you exile their whole graveyard. And on the last chapter, you get all the creatures exiled this way back as 2/2 Cybermen. It is not uncommon for this to make 8, 10 Cybermen, especially if the game has gone long and you play this out. So you can make a ton of 2/2 tokens, and then your opponent kind of has 1 turn to deal with your huge, huge Cyberman army. So this is one of the Sagas you'll find in this deck out of the 4 different Sagas. And of course, there's all kinds of horrible planes here too for the Doctor to have to deal with, ones that the Doctor would really like not to go to, such as the Doctor's Tomb. So here is a new plane you'll find in this deck where it deals some damage as things die, but most of all, I love that when Chaos hits, you get to redistribute everyone's life totals, which is exactly what happens in the episode. Basically, they jump into the time stream, they switch who wins a bunch of battles around, and if you maybe had 40 life and your opponent has 20 life, well, they hit this, suddenly they flip and your life total switches around, which I think is pretty cool and very flavorful. Now, those are the 4 decks of what you can expect to find in the 4 decks of Doctor Who Commander. Pretty cool, right? Yep. Lots of cool stuff. Now, the 4 decks contain all the mechanically unique cards you can expect to find in this product, but there are also collector boosters for this set. What's in the collector boosters? Well, there's no mechanically unique cards, but it is the place to get all the coolest treatments. And one that we came up with right off the bat that we absolutely love that we figured out is we're like, wait a second. The TARDIS is a rectangle. Another thing that's a rectangle is a magic card. What if we combine the 2? And we came up with this really cool frame treatment here that we'll bring up on screen. That's kind of our TARDIS frame treatment, where we actually put the characters inside of a TARDIS frame. I absolutely love this. And so we picked 30 cards from this set and put them in this frame. So all the Doctors get it. So here you see here, the 4th Doctor, 10th Doctor, and 13th Doctor. All cards we showed off today get this cool frame treatment. And they kind of have this comic book art style, many of which are done by huge fans of Doctor Who, or even some fan illustrators for Doctor Who. Of course, it's not just the Doctors. We also have their friends. So we've got Rose Tyler, Sarah Jane, Yasmin, and one of my personal favorites is the TARDIS in the TARDIS frame, which makes me smile a lot. Just seeing the door slightly open, inviting you on in is very cool. And we have, of course, their foes. So we've got Davros and Missy here. Missy, I love this art piece by Karen. She's a huge Doctor Who fan. She's done all kinds of Doctor Who-related stuff for ages. So to get to see her finally do a piece for this is awesome. Big shout out to her. And then, let's hold on the next slide for a second. So one thing that you might have noticed recently we started doing are these serialized cards. And so we wanted to do that for Doctor Who. We thought it would be really fitting to do for Doctor Who. And what if we did the Doctors as serialized cards? That would make a lot of sense. So now let's bring up the next slide here. Each of the Doctors, each of the numbers Doctors is serialized out of 500 plus whatever number Doctor they are. So, for example, the 4th Doctor has 504 different serialized ones, the 10th Doctor has 510 serialized ones, and so on. So I know that personally I think trying to get the 10th Doctor is going to be a pretty hot card you're going to want to go look for. And like I said, all of the numbered Doctors get this treatment. So that's a lot of pretty cool stuff for today. We've got a bunch of new cards, we've got cool booster fun, we've got these serialized Doctors. I'd love to tell you more, but I'm afraid that's going to be spoilers. Okay, maybe there's one more character I could show you involving spoilers. Let me show you one of my favorite cards in the whole set. I was told we couldn't even do this, and I can't believe we got it to work. Here is River Song with this absolutely wild first ability. The thing about River Song is she meets the Doctor in reverse order, right? So the first time they meet is the last time that River will ever meet the Doctor. So her first ability is you draw cards from the bottom of your deck instead of the top of your deck, which lets you build a very strange commander deck. All kinds of cards you would not expect are wild with the River Song. And then, of course, her big catchphrase is spoilers. So whenever your opponent scries, surveils, or searches, she dings them a little bit, which I think is delightful and just helps play into her little spoilers vibe there. River shows up in the 12th and 13th Doctor deck, so getting that +1/+1 counter also plays really well with the 13th Doctor, which I think is very cool. Kind of the line we drew for companions is if someone is in the TARDIS for a long time, a long duration, they're a Doctor's companion. And if they show up every now and then, they're not companions. So River gets to be 2 colors and on her own as just her awesome own commander. And like I said, one of my favorite cards in the whole set. I cannot wait to see what wild decks you all build with this. And that is what I have to say today about Doctor Who Commander. You all like that?
Yeah.
Well, awesome. It's a huge passion project of mine. I really love working on the set, and it hits on October 13th. So stay tuned over the next couple months as you find out a little bit more about what's to come in Doctor Who Commander. But there's another big set that comes out before then, a little set called Wilds of Eldraine. Eldraine has a lot of fan favorite cards and areas and moments, and to talk about it, who better than someone who's very excited to bring Eldraine to life in the first place, Mr. Mark Rosewater. Mark?
Yeah, so the theme is each one of us was born to do a set. So in my youth, I read a lot of fairy tales. So this set, many years ago, I had the dream of doing a fairy tale set. I tried for years to get it made. I couldn't. And finally, somebody else came up with the idea of doing an Arthurian set, and then I convinced the powers to be to add fairy tales to it. So one of the things you'll realize when we, in Throne of Eldraine, was we had just had a giant capstone event. The War of the Spark had happened, and we said we needed a breather from this giant event. So we had Throne of Eldraine. Well, we just had another giant event in which the Phyrexians invade the entire multiverse. So we figured, what better than a return to Eldraine? Now, the one thing to be, the Phyrexian War was a major event, and I understand that the war itself has ended, but the ramifications of the war extend on, and is perfectly shown through this set. So the king and queen were killed. Rowan and Will were desparked. And the entire kingdom is suffering from the tools they used to protect their world. We'll get to that in a second. The other big thing we decided to do was, one of the ramifications of the war is the courts took a lot of damage. So in the first set, when we did the first set, the Arthurian part of the set actually took up the majority of the set, and the fairy tales took up a smaller portion. So we're sort of flipping it this time. So we're leaving the courts and going out into the wilds of Eldraine. And so we're going to see a little bit more of the fairy tales. It's not that the Arthurian stuff isn't here. There's lots of knights and courts and stuff. But we're definitely doing a little bit more of a focus. And one of the cool things we're doing is our 10 draft archetypes are each built around a fairy tale. So I'll get to some of those as we talk through.
Yeah, we're not going to show them all off today, but we're going to tell you a few, and I look forward to you speculating what all the draft archetypes and what their fairy tales are, which is very, very cool. And so as you see, here's a really cool piece by Elena Danner, of course, kind of showing off the wilds of Eldraine, as it were, which is really fantastic. So let's talk through the story a little bit, Mark, and what's going on here.
Okay, so what happens is, when your world is invaded by Phyrexians, you go to the big guns, right? You go to the thing that's going to work most. So there's a giant magical spell called the Wicked Slumber. And it basically put the Phyrexians to sleep. Although as a side effect, it also put many of the people of the world to sleep. And although the Phyrexian invasion is done, they haven't quite solved the Wicked Slumber yet. So a lot of the people of the world, especially in the courts, are all asleep. And so one of the big challenges of the set, can we advance the next one? One of the challenges of the set is trying to deal with that. So to start with, the first card we're going to show you today is going to show something waking up. So yeah, what could wake up? A little guess for you.
Yeah.
What could wake up? So how many of you said land? So let's show the next card.
Yeah, so here's Restless Fortress. Of course, there's these creature lands in Magic, and kind of the fortress is asleep. You know, a lot of people there are taking a nap right now under the Wicked Slumber. Well, this land wakes up. Now, Mark, how many of these lands are in the set?
There are 5. It's an enemy cycle.
Right, so there's 5 enemy-colored dual lands in the set. They're all creature lands. They all turn into creatures. They can then attack or block, and they all kind of help show hey, the world is waking on up.
And if we've learned from the past, creature lands tend to be very good. Historically, they're very powerful cards. So it was exciting to sort of bring the creature lands to Eldraine.
Right, you fix your mana, and you get a creature all along the way. And of course, it's not just creature lands that look awesome in this set. We've got 10 awesome basic lands, or 5 awesome basic lands as well. 10 on this slide. 5 in English and 5 in Spanish as well for all of you locals to Barcelona. And they're absolutely stunning. I absolutely love these pieces, and kind of doing this amazing full art treatment with these basic lands. Now let's move on to the next slide here. And let's talk a little bit about the Wicked Slumber, Mark.
Right, so basically what happened is they did what they needed to do to survive, and now there's a lot of ramifications. And so the main characters in the set are trying to figure out, how do we break the slumber? How do we wake people up?
Right, so if we go to the next slide, you'll see here's some more sleeping people.
Yeah,
you're going to see a lot of snoozing people in this set. So if we go to the next slide here, let's take a look at that. Here's a bunch of knights that are stuck in the Wicked Slumber. And there's a new character as well that's kind of involved in the Wicked Slumber. If we could bring up the next image for this character here. Mark, tell me who this is.
So this is Talion. So like I said, there are 10 draft archetypes. So the blue-black draft archetype is Sleeping Beauty. And so now, be aware, when I say we're doing our versions of it. We're not doing exactly what you might know. We're doing our take on it. So this is our take on Sleeping Beauty. So Talion, they're the one that casts the spell. They're a fairy noble, I think. And they're the one that casts the spell, the Wicked Slumber. But they have their own agenda. They're blue-black, so they're up to their own things. But it's one of the fun things is we've woven sort of the fairy tales into the story itself. So like the Wicked Slumber obviously is very much a Sleeping Beauty part of the story. If you don't know Sleeping Beauty, they put the entire kingdom to sleep to protect Sleeping Beauty.
Now, who out there wants to see the card for Talion?
Oh yeah.
All right, I guess we show them the card.
Okay,
Let's do it. Let's show them the card for Talion. Here we go. Here's Talion, the Kindly Lord. This is a 3/4 flying fairy noble, and it has this really fun little mini game where you pick a number, and then whenever they do something that matches that number, they lose life and you draw a card. So it puts your opponents all in a bit of a bind, kind of not unlike the Wicked Slumber in a sense.
Yes.
Yeah, so if they're going to make some hard decisions. Now, it's not just, of course, there's a lot of new characters, and not just Talon that you're going to see here. There's also some archetypical characters, like this character. Mark, what are we seeing right here?
Okay, so there's 3 witch sisters that represent 3 different stories and 3 different archetypes. So Hilda is the sort of the Snow Queen. In white blue represents the story of the Snow Queen, a famous Hans Christian Andersen story.
And if we go to the next slide, here's another a character I bet a lot of you will pick up on.
Agatha is a witch that collects children in the forest. What story might that be? So black-green is Hansel and Gretel. Although we have, as you'll see in a second, we have our take on it. There's a really fun take on Hansel and Gretel.
And then the next image here is this. I love this piece.
And
absolutely
Ariette,
amazing.
Well, you might see she has an apple in her hand. So white-black is Snow White. So we're doing our version of Snow White. And so she is the evil queen who wants to be the fairest in the land.
And pay attention to the reflection on the collar. That little detail, things are not as they seem.
Right, she looks very youthful, but as you see in that collar there, as the video wisely points out, maybe a little bit of magic going on there.
Yep.
Amazing piece here by Magali. Definitely go tell her for her incredible job. I absolutely love this one.
Yeah, the apple gets its own card too.
All right, so now let's hold on the next image for a second. So there's also some returning characters that you will recognize showing up here. And there's one character that is very, very, very happy about everyone being asleep. And that character is, of course, someone who loves nightmares, and that would be Ashiok. Let's bring the card up on the screen here.
Okay, so something important about this. During the war, the Phyrexian War, the desparkening happened, and what that meant was a lot of Planeswalkers lost their spark. Not all of them, but starting with this set, there is 1 Planeswalker per set. So Ashiok is the Planeswalker in the set. There are other former Planeswalkers in the set, we'll see in a second, but Ashiok is the only Planeswalker.
Right, so this is something kind of brand new. Right? This is a big deal, and from our perspective, it lets us put a huge focus on that Planeswalker. Right, we put a lot of testing resources into them, and to spend a lot of time making sure they are awesome. And Ashiok is pretty awesome here.
Yes.
I'm not going to read it all to you, but it is a very powerful card, and you can definitely expect to be playing with this one. So there's a returning character.
Ashiok will be a nightmare for your opponent.
That's right. That's right. That's a returning character. There's also a brand new character that we'll be seeing some of. Here's Kellen. Who is this?
So Kellen has a mysterious origin. So one of the things we're doing is there's the next story arc we're telling, which is going to be 3 years long. This is the first year starting here, and the first year we're calling the Omen Path arc. So the Omen Paths are part of what happened in the Phyrexian War and the World Tree. They're now paths between worlds. They're unstable, they can shift, they can change, but people can now travel between worlds that aren't Planeswalkers. And that's going to play a really big role. So there's a major storyline starting up. So pay attention. Kellen's going to be very important. I don't want to give away any things, but Kellen has a mysterious path that's going to matter.
Well, speaking of some other characters that might have some paths that are going to be pretty important to the story, here's one that you're going to recognize. Here is Will. So what's going on with Will and Rowan here?
So when I said there's only 1 Planeswalker, I meant Planeswalker card. We are going to see other former Planeswalkers that have been disparked. So in this set, Will is in the set, Rowan is in the set. So there are 3 Planeswalker characters, but only 1 who still has their spark.
And so,
and so what's going on is Will and Rowan are the prince and princess, but the king and queen died, and so they are sort of stepping up, and they need to solve the problems of this world. The big issue is that Will and Rowan do not agree on how to solve it. And I think if you look at the name of Will, he's Will's sign of peace, and Rowan is Rowan's sign of war. Maybe that's a sign they don't quite agree.
Indeed, and their cards are very cool, so can't wait for you to check those out and see exactly how they're in opposition to one another. Now, you've seen a bunch of big characters and all that kind of stuff, but I really think there's one thing you'll want to see more than anything else when it comes to Eldraine. It's the most important thing of them all, and that is, of course, food. So let's take a look at this card. Mark, what's going on here?
So,
yeah, there we go. That's the cheer I was waiting for. Nothing gets Magic players excited like food, am I right?
So what happened is we wanted to tell the story of Hansel and Gretel, but we wanted to do our version of the story. And so there's a lot of animated food, mostly sweets, animated sweets that are going to do some fighting. And there's a lot of really fun cards in the set. Food specifically, food was a big part of original Eldraine. We wanted to bring it back. We did bring it back. And multiple archetypes, black-green being one of them, are going to play into the food archetype. Now, we learned from Throne of Eldraine, and so what we're doing is making sure that there are things to do with your food that are more aggressive. You'll see here on Tough Cookie, the Tough Cookie can use food in a way to help win the game rather than stall the game. But if you like gingerbread characters or animated food or just food tokens in general, we got you covered.
Now let's talk about those archetypes a little bit. You mentioned earlier, Mark, that different archetypes are kind of different archetypical stories.
Yes.
Let's show some of the kind of key legends for them.
Okay. Okay, so this is the signpost for red-green, which is, who is this, guys? Little Red Riding Hood. Our take on Little Red Riding Hood.
More like Little Red Green Riding Hood, I suppose, you know.
Yes. Well, our Little Red Riding Hood kicks a little more butt than I think the original Red Riding Hood. But so that's the red-green archetype. Next slide. This is from the black-green archetype. That's our version of Gretel. Gretel, once again, all our characters kick a little more butt than the original fairy tale version. But she has an axe, for example, covered with candy on it because she's been chopping sweets. Okay, next. This is the green-blue archetype. It is, can you guess who this is? This is Jack and the Beanstalk. The Beanstalk is green and stealing everything is blue. Now you'll notice it's a Vidalcan. Our version of Jack is a Vidalcan. You might say to yourself, wait a minute, there aren't Vidalcan on Eldraine. Well, this is a good example of the Omen Pass. Part of what you'll start seeing because of the Omen Pass is there'll be a little bit of migration between things. So you might see things that you might not normally expect on Worlds. In this particular case, we have a Vidalcan, and this Vidalcan is our version of Jack and the Beanstalk.
Okay, so let's take a look at a couple art pieces here that kind of have this like kind of storybook feel to them. If we go to the next slide, yeah. Here's this really cool dragon with the storybook kind of feeling. I love this piece. Here's an absolute stunner piece next. I mean, I love this one. Kind of once again the storybook vibes, really unique art style. Here's another piece, kind of has this storybook thing going on.
And this is one of the, I talked about the sweets that come to life.
Yeah.
This is one of our monster sweets.
So if you're seeing all these cool kind of storybook things, what does that imply? Well, perhaps it implies return of a popular mechanic. You might have guessed it. Adventure is back.
Okay, so if we're going to go to Eldraine, so original Eldraine, the #1 rated mechanic by far was Adventure. People loved Adventure, so how do we not do Eldraine without doing Adventure? It's a world of adventure. So we've brought Adventures back. We have done a few new things. You'll notice on the preview card that the adventure is not the same color as the original spell. Now, not all adventures do that. We have some adventures that are in the same color, but we're definitely, when we come back to something, we like to explore. And so we definitely do some exploration. We're not giving everything away here, but we definitely explore a bit with what the adventures is. But if you love adventures, adventures are back.
And so you see they have this awesome kind of storybook treatment, alternate version as well. And speaking of alternate versions, all of the dual lands you can find in a really cool borderless style. So here's that Restless Fortress we saw earlier in an awesome borderless version that looks fantastic. And all 5 of these dual lands come this way. As well as, of course, Ashiok. We will continue making borderless planeswalkers. This is such a cool art piece for this. Now, let's hold for a second. There's one other big thing we want to talk about today. Lead us into it, Mark.
One of the things, whenever we go back to a world, we like to introduce something new, and we're moving away from the courts and into the wilds. And one of the things we realized was that enchantments had a really interesting theme, and the idea of enchantment is a big part of fairy tales. And it got pointed out that we have a lot of worlds that focus on artifacts, and like Theros is the only world that focuses on enchantment. So we decided we would add it. So there's a new mechanic in the set that I'm not introducing today, but it's enchantment focused. And so there is a strong enchantment theme in the set, which leads into we are doing a bonus sheet called Enchanted Tales. And the bonus sheet are all highly, reprints that are enchantments.
Right, and there's, I believe, 63 different ones.
So let's
take a look at a
to
few.
see some?
Yeah. And so they all have this very cool art style. So we're gonna kind of go through these kind of quickly, but here's Prismatic Omen, absolutely stunning. Here is, they're not all rares. Here's Curiosity as well, an oldie but a goodie. Combo this with Niv Mizzet, have a great time. Some of them are quite exciting. There's a card we have almost never reprinted, Greater Oromancy as well. And some blasts all the way from the past, like Necropotence, which is right here. Commander players, if you love drawing cards, how about Rhystic Study? Or if you like your opponent drawing cards, how about Smothering Tithe? Yeah, pretty exciting stuff. And yeah, another big one that Commander players I think like is this little card called Doubling Season.
The best card ever made.
If we go to this with a goose on it, nonetheless. Right, that's perfect. Or maybe instead of doubling your tokens, you want to double your combats. Well, how about Aggravated Assaults? Absolutely incredible. So let's bring up all of them on one slide here. So these are in the set. Like I said, you'll get one per pack, and there are 63 in the set. I'll also call out that we're not going to show it here right now, but if you go check out social media, our Japanese partners, you'll be able to find a cool version of these cards that is special to Japan or special to special Japanese treatment. It'll be all over social media. Check that out. It's very cool. I'm not going to say too much about that right now, but you'll find out about that very, very soon, announced by our Japanese partners. Two other quick things I want to show you before we leave today are a reprint card that you'll be seeing a lot of. Here is a card called Sleight of Hand. This is a very powerful one-mana cantrip. It shows up in the F&M promo pack, so we want to show it off to you today a little bit early. You'll find it in this cool frame. And the very last card we're going to show for you today, it's a card request I get all the time. Look, Craterhoof Behemoth is really powerful. It's in green. Green likes to go wide with creatures, but you know who really likes going wide with creatures? White. Why isn't there a white Craterhoof Behemoth? And we thought, hey, wait, why isn't there? And we made Moonshaker Cavalry. So this is a huge creature. When it comes into play, all your creatures get +X/+X and flying, where X is the number of creatures you control. So this is an absolute game winner. You top out with this in your white decks. Some of your opponents are dying for sure. So I know that was a lot. Hopefully you all enjoyed the panel. You guys have a blast? Okay, well, I'm glad you all enjoyed it. Well, coming up next, you can check out From Dreamer to Fame, the journey of content creation here on this main stage, so do not go anywhere. Thank you all for watching. On behalf of me, Mark Rosewater, Ovidio, and the entire team at Wizards of the Coast, I hope you enjoyed these previews and enjoy MagicCon Barcelona. We'll see you out there.